This is the power of books.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 8 of The Power of Books. My name is Timo Jübner, I'm the founder of Timo's Notes, and every week I interview popular non-fiction authors about their best-selling books. The goal of the show is to introduce you to new books and provide you with helpful advice and practical tools to improve your life. My guest today is Nick Bracks. Nick is an actor, public speaker, and the author of Move Your Mind. He's also an acclaimed mental health advocate and has delivered more than 1,000 mental health seminars around the globe, including 2 TED Talks. In this conversation today, we talk about Nick's own personal battle with mental health, the stigma around mental health in society, the 4 practical pathways to mental health and well-being he shares in his book, and a lot more. So now let's get right into our conversation. Enjoy the show. Nick Bracks, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's really glad we're able to do it. We've been chatting a little bit online and, you were nice enough to do a post about my book, and I'm super glad to be able to sit here with you and through technology have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to this. So you're the author of Move Your Mind, and you start your book with, in my opinion, some really mind-blowing numbers about mental health. Could you maybe mention one or two of those and explain what they're all about?
Absolutely. So, I don't have the book on hand right now and I haven't looked at it, so I can't quote the exact numbers, but I do talk a lot in there about the figures. We've got things like, one of them, and this is a really heavy one, but when it comes to suicide, one person around the world commits suicide every 30 to 60 seconds now, which is just crazy. And when you look at the amount of money lost in the economy due to mental health issues in the workplace that aren't being treated, it's billions of dollars globally. And that's because, and a lot of the work we do with Move Your Mind is going into these companies and trying to educate them on, how they can become more self-aware and, have more open conversations, share their thoughts and feelings, and, all these things that you don't traditionally actually do in a company. And what it's doing is it's causing burnout. It's causing people to eventually crack and quit their jobs or, have too many sick days. And the numbers are crazy because, you can even be present at work but not operating properly, not actually being productive because you're not addressing your other parts of your life and you're not looking after yourself. So yeah, there's a lot of figures around it, and it really reinforces, just why it's so important that we have these conversations.
Yeah, and you make that point in the book for sure. So even though this is such a big thing and so many people are affected, there's still kind of a stigma around talking about the topic of mental health. Like, why do you think is that? And what can we do to fix it?
I think that's a really good question, and I totally agree. I think the positive thing is the conversation has increased in the, last period of years. It's more talked about, there's more awareness, there's more initiatives. I've seen that in Australia and I've seen it starting to happen globally. I think Australia is actually ahead of a lot of countries. I've been living in New York and I feel like America's actually very behind in where they're at on a broad sense with it. But like you said, I got into this over 10 years ago and at that time no one was talking about it. It was incredibly taboo. And now we're at a point where it's talked about everywhere. People know about it. And it's, there's a lot of good things out there, but in some ways what's happening is people are jumping on that trend and just trying to use it to capitalize and make money out of how can I do whatever this new, startup is in mental health. But I think at the core, the grassroots level, like what you're saying, people don't realize there's a long way to go. What we actually should be focusing on is how can we further that conversation? How can we educate men to, really become more comfortable with being themselves, with talking about what they're going through and not feeling like they're going to be judged? Because it might sound like, on that broad level from what we're hearing in the media and seeing on social media and seeing from whatever other people are saying that it's advanced that much. But on the real day-to-day grassroots level in companies, communities, different communities around the world, there's such a long way to go, like you said, and we need to be focusing on that, in my opinion.
Yeah, you make a really good point in the book when you say that nowadays it's normal when somebody, for example, has a broken leg or something like that they are not going to be at work or that they need rest, and like it's normal that they get the treatment and everything. But if people have mental health issues, it seems like it's not normal. So like people make like the ones affected might feel like they are not allowed to share this or call in sick because of that at work and stuff like that. So we really, as you say in the book, I'm just basically rephrasing what you're saying, but we should really make this get to a point where it's the same thing. It doesn't matter what you have in terms of health, whether that's physical or mental, it should be treated the same way.
Agree. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's like if you're a human, you're going to have, physical things happen. You're going to have problems that you have to deal with. It's impossible not to over the course of a lifetime. And again, if you're human, it's basically impossible not to, have mental health related things that you have to deal with, unless you're a robot. We're human, and whether you're a male or a female or whoever the hell you are, it doesn't matter. You're going to feel emotions. You're going to have ups and downs. It's literally impossible. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how famous you are, who your parents are, who your friends are, what, position you're in. Every single person is going to, we can't avoid it. So I think until we get to that point where it is literally seen as the same thing, and people don't, question that part of it, that there's still huge way to go.
Yeah. For context for the listeners, I want to talk a little bit about your personal story with mental health and why you are now such a big advocate for this. So I think the biggest story that you share in the book is when you had a car crash as a young adult. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so for anyone listening, I have been a mental health advocate for, it would be probably 12 years now. I got into it in my early 20s, and I, growing up, suffered from OCD, severe anxiety, overthinking. It manifested in extreme behavior patterns. So I was training sort of 6-7 hours a day, wanting to be a professional middle distance runner at the time as like a 12-year-old. I wouldn't be sleeping properly, and I was just driving myself into the ground, and it delayed my physical development for a number of years, and a whole lot of psychological problems came from it. And I'd also grown up in a well-known family. So my dad was one of the biggest politicians in Australia. So since I was 12 years old also, we're in the media, people knew who we were. I'm the eldest of 3 kids. So I was sort of the one who was more prominent in the media. And then when I finished at school, I got into modeling work. I was on reality shows, and, it became much more prominent. I actually became, well known, had a public profile myself in Australia. And it was while I was dealing with a lot of these issues. So I'd be out partying, and I was abusing alcohol. And when I was in this really dark period, I dropped out of 2 courses at university. I was lost. I didn't see a future. I didn't know what I wanted to do or who I was, or because I had identified as being a professional athlete my whole life, and I couldn't do that anymore. And also felt like because my dad was so successful in politics and I was, and same as my siblings, we're all known for being the kids of this well-known politician. I felt like I didn't have any self-worth, and I couldn't, whatever I did, it doesn't really matter. It's going to pale in comparison to what my dad's done. So I was really self-destructive and hated myself, had no self-esteem, didn't know, what the hell to do. Didn't want to see a future. I felt numb. I got to that point where, and it's why, what I remind myself when I'm doing this awareness work, I, never got to the point where I was suicidal, but I got to the point where I felt so empty and so numb and so lacking in purpose that I just could not see a future. I didn't want to see a future. I didn't want a solution. I just wanted everything to stop. And almost impossible to describe the feeling, because it goes on 24/7 all day, every day for long periods. And you feel like you basically have been put in a prison cell and, they've thrown the key away and there's no way to get out and there's no solution. And the gift that came out of that for me was it gave me it gave me empathy for other people and an understanding of what people go through. And it's easy to forget that. And even now, I'll sort of can be dismissive sometimes, thinking, why can't that person just get through this? And I remind myself, hang on, let's think back to what you felt then. And this person, everyone feels their own version of whatever they're going through. So it really gave me that reminder. So I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but while all this was happening, that led to this car crash. So that was sort of the pinnacle of, drinking, getting in these, sometimes life-threatening situations, from abusing alcohol, drinking till I'd black out, passing out, in unknown sort of places, and getting into really dangerous. I won't go through them all, but getting into really dangerous situations. And one of them was, I'd been out and had come back with my best friend. I'd actually grown up with this friend since we were kids, and we got home and I wasn't thinking clearly. He took the car out for a drive to get food or something, and he was lying in the backseat of the car, both incredibly drunk. And I was going sort of, 90 or 100 kilometers an hour on a main road. It's raining. Something in my head clicked. What am I doing? Went to turn the car around while I was going that speed, and it lost control and just span around in circles. And it was literally like, it is like something in a movie, where I remember it spinning. I was playing this old cassette of the Red Hot Chili Peppers that had Under the Bridge on it, full blast. And I just remember hearing these lyrics blaring of this really, emotional song, and, seeing houses in front of me while the car's spinning, and just thinking, having the time in this split second thing to think, I'm 20 years old. What have I done here? I might die right now. Like, I don't want to die. And my best friend's in the car. What have I done to him? Like, this can't be the meaning of my life. And all these things happening, and ended up wrapping the car around the tree. And luckily he was lying down, and luckily he jumped up as it hit. Otherwise he would have actually been killed, because his head was facing the side of the car that got crushed in half. So he had to get surgery, and, there was no long-term damage, but it was a severe thing. It became the biggest story in Australia for a number of weeks, and, was sort of it actually wasn't the turning point I thought it would be, and then I fell back into the same behaviour patterns, but it was one of a series of events that eventually led me to getting help and, going on the journey that I've been on, and then spending so much of my life going and just speaking, walking into companies, into schools, on media, wherever I could, just using my voice to educate. And it's sort of really pushed me on that trajectory. So that's, I guess, in a long-winded way. I know you just asked about the car crash, but I thought I'd just give a bit of a backstory around it as well. But that's a long-winded answer to that.
Yeah, that's perfect. No. And I asked the question actually to give the listeners context that you're not like many others out there, somebody who just talks about this but hasn't really experienced it himself. Like, you've actually, and this isn't like supposed to be a good thing, but you've experienced this and you kind of know what you're talking about, and you have come out of this place. Like, you have, I would say, turned your life around. So that's why you speak about it now and give people the tools that helped you. So I just wanted to get that out there for context for listeners. So you also talk about that you had therapy when you were going through that. So maybe for someone right now who feels like they are in a dark place and they fear kind of taking that step, going to therapy, what would you tell someone like that? What therapy is like, and maybe why they should do it, or if it's a good step?
Definitely. I'd say, number one, mental health is incredibly complicated in the sense that, there's no one size fits all. Therapy is an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. But even therapy alone, without taking action yourself and doing other things, won't be enough. So it's sort of a combination of lots of things. And I think therapy is a really important part. I think with therapy, it's something that every single person on the planet should do at some point in their life. And we should all continue doing, ongoing as much as we can, because again, it's like saying, I only want to go to the gym when I need to lose weight or when I really get out of shape. It's like, well, I personally think, and I think, science would back this up, that everyone would benefit from exercising every day. It's good for you. It's great for your mental health. You feel good. It's what we're actually built to do. We're not built to be sitting down. All the jobs that we do now, or most of them, we're sitting at a computer staring at a screen where, our body and our mind is not built for that. So I think therapy was really important. If you're going through something, I think it's critical. So my message always is, and again, what we try and do with Move Your Mind, it's two things. How can we educate people in a really simplistic way where anyone can just understand, okay, here are some first steps that I can take that are really practical. Number two, what can I do to empower myself to take control? An example is, in my own life, and this has all been through trial and error, but I found things that work for me. I meditate at least once a day. I go to the gym every day. I try and do gratitude journaling. I have people that I'm close with that I can talk openly about what I'm going through. That's really important to me. Pursuing that's been really important as a creative outlet for me. So I found these things over a long period of time, and I refine it, and I keep refining it now. But finding your own version of that, and no one can say, what is the right or wrong thing for someone. I think there's a lot of this motivational crap out there where these people are saying, I've got the formula to help you be more productive, or to help you become the best version of yourself, or to the best fitness program, or I've got the mindfulness thing that's going to help. It's like, it's all bullshit. There's no one size fits all. It's like, it's like whatever works for the person. So I think it's really important. And I think if the message to anyone that's struggling with anything is just do something, this is what I say. I've always said, there's only one thing you should not do, and that's doing nothing. So if you're struggling, taking the first step is the hardest thing. So, go and find a therapist. If you can't do that, go and talk to someone. If you don't feel comfortable talking to someone, go and download an app and, do that. If you don't know where to go, or you're embarrassed, literally type into Google free mental health helpline, and whatever country you're in, things will come up. You can call them. That'll be the first step that will lead to you then taking other action. So I think it's just so important that we understand that, and just, because the longer you sit on it, the worse it will get. So just taking action is really important.
Yeah, I love that. The worst thing you can do is do nothing. You quickly touched on or mentioned the current culture, and hustle culture is a term these days, and I guess you probably don't like it very much. What's your take on, because also when you shared your story about practicing 6 or 7 hours a day as a child, some people might see it or hear this and think, well, you had a goal and you worked so hard, and that there's something admirable. But what do you think? Is it, or is it actually, as you said, counterproductive?
I mean, yeah, I think it's good to work hard in the right way, but, and I've been living in America, which is the sort of epicenter, in New York, the epicenter of hustle and trying to, capitalism and greed and trying to acquire more things. And I think the problem is we live in a world where people are at all costs just wanting to make more money, become more famous, to get, to one up everyone. And I think that whole hustle culture is incredibly unhealthy. And I think it's not conducive to making people happy, because we should work hard, but I think we do things in the wrong order, because to work, it's as hard, if not harder, arguably harder to work on yourself and your personal development and, find who you are, what's your purpose, what do you want to do, how are you going to do it. That whole process is really difficult and time consuming. So I think we should spend the time on that first. And then once you find it, then you can, it's still not going to be healthy to hustle as hard as these motivational speakers say you should, and I don't think it's sustainable anyway. Like, I think they're saying things that, people aren't going to be, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years and doing this, doing that. It's like not sustainable. And even if it is sustainable, you know what, like, life's short. Why don't we enjoy our life as well? And I say these things, in a contradictory way, because I can fall into it myself, and I put a lot of pressure on myself and get obsessive and want, certain things, but I don't think that's good. So I think that's a really important thing, and once you do find what you want to do, then finding a way to work at that, and in a healthy and practical way. But I think because so many people are lost, and because culture and society's told us that we just need to make money and do this and blah blah blah, people are just doing things they don't really care about. Get rich quick schemes, people that are jumping on crypto and Web3 and all this stuff that I don't freaking even know anything about. I'm sure there's people that actually genuinely like it and are interested, but there's a lot of people that think, how do I just quickly, make money, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to become the next big thing. It's like, well, why don't you just find something you actually care about and just do it, and then hopefully you can excel at it and become the next big thing. But even if you don't, you're actually doing something that gives you meaning and purpose. And I think if everyone did that, the world becomes a significantly better place in interactions. And, you can't even talk to people anymore. You sit there and you talk to someone, and that's why I love these podcast interviews, like what we're both doing, because these are real conversations. We're sitting here, for 30 to 60 minutes and just actually listening and talking to each other. That doesn't happen in real life very often now. Even if you're with a friend, you're sitting there, and I think anyone listening knows what this is like. When you're sitting talking to someone, you see their eyes glazed over and they're sort of nodding in acknowledgement, but they're not listening. If you said to them, hey, can you repeat what I just said to you? They don't remember, they don't know what you said, because no one can focus anymore. So yeah, I think that's all a byproduct of this, so-called hustle culture.
Yeah, one point you made that I really support, and something that I've heard in other places too, what I think is the difference is that you should work hard when you're working, but you should not work hard at all times. Like, there's time where you're not working, and then you should do whatever you're doing hard, like cooking hard, eating hard, working out hard, but you don't have to work. So I think that's the difference too, like, just work while you're at work, and then when you're in other places or with other people, then you're like not working anymore.
Exactly.
And especially like, because right now I'm working from home, and this also was a huge thing during the pandemic, and I realized that made it really difficult to separate work from private life, because suddenly you have like all your hardware and everything at home, and like if you don't have a big apartment or anything, you're sitting at the same table or same desk in your free time than in your work. And then that makes it really hard to separate the two things and kind of get your thoughts off of work. And I think that this has really affected many people as well. So
majorly, yeah, totally agree. It's so hard to switch off, and same with me. I work mainly remotely now, and I like it, but then it can be really hard to switch off, and it can be hard. It can get depressing as well. You want to be around other people. You want to be physically around them, bounce things off people, not just staring at a screen and having Zoom calls all day. So it can be, everything's got positives and negatives, but I think it's, again, part of the realization of it. Whatever the hell we do, there's going to be positives and negatives. So how do we make the most of a situation? And, in companies, we're seeing this a lot now, where burnout's just becoming such a big thing because COVID's made so many things go remote, and it means that, there's no boundary now of when they do and don't work, and their boss might be calling them or sending them an email or message at 10 at night and expecting them to reply. So then you're not switching off. So I think creating those boundaries, and it's hard to do, but trying to find a way to create those boundaries is so important, because otherwise we will just get burnt out. We won't have quality of life.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have some kind of end of day routine that you do when you finish your work day to kind of get your mind, like, to give yourself closure for the work day?
I just made a skit about it last night. So it's called getting into bed with a bag of chips and watching Netflix and eating the whole thing until your stomach feels like it's going to burst open. I highly recommend you don't do that, and that became a bad habit for me. Because I'm like really good in the morning, and I get up, I go to the gym, I meditate, I work all day. But then nighttime's the thing I'm actually trying to work on more, because what happens for me is I'll do all these things and then I'll unwind, and then, I'll sort of be wanting to watch a movie and just do that. So what I was doing before that would be meditating before, at night as well. I find really important and I think a lot of people can relate to this where, so I'm not going to say what I do, because my nighttime thing is actually something I need to fix. And I think it's, important to be honest about these things. But what I should be doing would be, meditating at night, because I think, like we're talking about, it's hard to turn off from work. And when you're staring at screens, you're stimulated all day. If you don't separate yourself from the screens, give yourself maybe an hour or two before you go to bed, not looking at screens, not using technology, meditating to slow your mind down. And then, not eating too close to when you go to bed, trying to have a regular, time that you go to bed. And again, I'm horrific with this because I'm like I was saying, I'm good with the other parts, but because I've been living in New York and my business is in Australia, and I'm some of my work's in New York, some's in Australia. So I'll be up sometimes till 2 a.m. having meetings, and then you go to bed and then you wake up later, and then the next night you're going to bed earlier. So, I think that's really bad. But our body and our mind responds really well if we have a regular bedtime, a regular time we get up. So I think that's, all of those things are so important. And, sleep is, we all know obviously how important sleep is, but there's more and more science coming out about it. And it's, it's probably the most important thing, sleep and diet, and it's so linked to our mental well-being, and if we don't get enough sleep, there's so many side effects from it, short and long term. So yeah, it's such an important thing. So basically, anyone listening to this, just do the opposite of what I do in your end of day routine, and you'll be good.
So don't grab a bag of chips, don't take your phone to the bed, then you're good.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's good that you're honest about it, because evening routine is also something that I haven't really figured out yet. Like, as you said, I kind of know what I'm supposed to do, but then it's so hard to actually do it and get in bed on time and everything. So yeah, I also have these days where I just get to bed a couple hours later as usual, and then the next morning is crap, but it happens.
Exactly.
We also shouldn't be too hard on ourselves.
100%, we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. We can't do everything. We don't need to do everything. There's no such thing as perfect anyway. So it's just, I think it's finding, what works for you. I would like to fix the nighttime stuff and get it better. I don't want to perfect it, because for me, the thing that is really important that I get personal value out of is getting up, going to the gym, doing my routines during the day. That really, is good for my mental health, my self-esteem, getting my mind right, all that sort of thing. That works for me. And I would be better if I did the nighttime stuff. But like you said, we don't, one thing at a time, and you want to find balance and enjoy life and not make it so rigid. And, when you hear all these stories, and again, these people on social media that are screaming how amazing they are and that they only sleep 4 hours a night and they do everything perfect, it's like, you know what? I don't believe them. I don't think humans are meant to live like that. And if these guys are doing it, good on them. I don't want that life, because that sounds shit. That sounds like your life would be so fucking boring that, fuck it. I'd rather just enjoy life if that's what you have to do.
Yeah, the problem with social media, in my opinion, is that you can create a picture of yourself the way you want others to see yourself. You could only show one part where you're disciplined, but there are other parts that you just don't show, where you're not disciplined at all, or you can only show the cool stuff you do, but then all the bad stuff you don't have to show. So people need to be aware that social media is just a highlight reel, and it's hard, especially for young people, I guess, because they might not be aware of it yet. But the more I use it, the more I realize, well, these people are just sharing the good parts, and then you look at it and might feel bad about yourself because you're sitting at home these people are sitting at home too. They just don't share it. So
exactly. Yeah. I totally agree. And I think it's really terrifying for, I'm 35 now, and I grew up without technology hadn't taken over. We didn't have social media. I didn't have a phone till I was 15 or 16. So I was out in the park playing with my friends, kicking balls around, climbing trees. And it scares me, like, what is going to happen to these kids that are growing up with all they've ever known is social media technology, 24/7. Their brains are developing with these devices. And I've seen how bad it can be even if you didn't grow up with it. So it's really terrifying, and I think something has to change eventually. I don't know how, whether the government can intervene or how the hell it happens, but it is bad. It's really bad. I think it's only getting worse, and it's not going to change anytime soon unless something drastic happens. So I think it's one of the biggest issues that we face in this mental health, area.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Like, I mean, I'm not an age yet where I'm thinking about having kids, but in my opinion, the parents really have to take the responsibility to monitor how much time do their kids spend on these devices and on social media and everything. But that's not happening, and that's the issue. I think
Totally.
Parents really have to be responsible for their kids. But yeah, I will hopefully do that one day, but that's a couple years down the line. You don't know what will be the status quo then, like what kind of new technology emerges. But yeah, I plan to do that.
I agree with you though. That's the same with me, and I think it comes down to the two key areas. I think are parents, like you said, because a lot of the stuff that we're taught emotionally, it's a generational thing where our parents never got taught emotional skills from their parents, and it goes back so far. So someone's got to break that cycle. So if your parents haven't done that to you, you've got to be the catalyst to say, I'm going to change myself, and I'm then going to break this whole cycle, and I'm going to educate my kids on an emotional level. So I think that's one critical area. The other critical area is schooling. The schooling system's totally archaic. It hasn't changed for so long, and it doesn't suit the modern world. And we need, there's a little bit of it happening, but there should be core emotional learning subjects, and it should be something that we're taught from a very young age, and it's embedded into us, because I think it is not only an important part of life, I think it's the most important part of life, because it affects everything every day: relationships, how we think about ourselves, what we do, how we look at the world, everything, every single thing. So I think it's just those two key things I think are critical to the long term, because a lot of the stuff out there at the moment is Band-Aid solutions. The things the government put forward, Band-Aid solutions, very important. If someone's not well, we need to treat them. What do we do? These services are critical, but there's nowhere near enough good preventative things out there. And that's where the, huge effort, huge resource, huge amount of money, government, everything, there should be so much going into that, because I think that's the only way we can actually make long-term change.
Yeah, that's 100% right. So before we get into what you call the 4 practical pathways for people to implement in their life, I want to touch on, because I heard you say that when you started taking acting classes, that was one of the best things you could do or you have done for your personal development. So why is that? Like, well, what's so good about it, and how can you, like, maybe other people use it too for themselves?
Yeah, totally. I think I love that you brought that one up, and I really do believe that. I got into acting in my mid-20s, or a bit later even, 26, 27, I got into acting. And I was incredibly shy. I was, had no self-esteem. I didn't know how to express myself. I was afraid to look someone in the eyes and talk to them. And I was sort of falling into public speaking at the time, which I found incredibly difficult, and I was, I was bad at it at the beginning, and I was terrified to stand in front of anyone. And I always was interested in the acting, and it was after I'd been on some reality shows, and I thought, I'll just give it a go, and I was terrified, and I was horrible at the beginning. I couldn't remember lines. I was embarrassed to read the lines in front of everyone. But once I properly got into it, I fell in love with it, because I started learning, really acting's just psychology. All it's about is understanding yourself and other people. You can't you cannot play another character if you don't know yourself well enough, because you've got to know yourself well enough that you can separate yourself from the character and try and understand, what the character's going through. And you can't play another character if you don't have the ability to look at other people without judging them. So if someone is behaving in a negative way that you don't agree with, to play that person, you can't just sit there and think they're a shocking person. You got to sit there and think, hey, where's the humanity in this person? What did this person go through that led them to these bad decisions they're making or this bad behavior? What's actually happened? Did they have all these traumatic events happen to them growing up? Did their dad treat them badly? Did they, I don't know, did they go through some hugely traumatic event? What actually happened? And then once you really go and dig into that, you can then look at, actually, you know what? I've got empathy for this character. I don't agree with their behavior, but I can understand it. And then you've got to put your mind in that to play them. And I think it's, it makes you learn so much about yourself. It makes you have to remove your ego. It makes you learn about other people and just have an understanding in general, which I think is critical. And I think in the world now, we need more of that than ever, because we live in a world of echo chambers where everyone, if someone's got an opinion about something, we don't need to be challenged anymore. We can just go online and find a group of people. If I believe that vaccines are going to kill you, I can just go and find a group that agree online, and I don't have to have a critical conversation with anyone else, and about it. I can just stay in my little group and reinforce my belief, and that's it. And that's not incredibly unhealthy. Even if you're, and who knows, it's not, and there's so many lesser situations like that where it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about critical conversation and being able to both have different opinions in a healthy way, and using fact and using logic and intelligence to try and work out what is right and what's wrong, or what's the right answer here. So I think it's a really, anyway, that's what I like about acting. I'm sort of going on to another area now.
Yeah, but it's such an important point that you just mentioned, that many people really have trouble having conversations, like critical conversations or discussions with other people if they have a different opinion. And I think that's also a symptom of the social media world. But it's so important to also talk to people who don't think the same way. And yeah, so I love that you brought this up, actually. So
yeah.
One method you mentioned in the book that I wanted to ask you about, because I haven't heard it before, is the Perdekamp emotional method. And I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but yeah, I think you know what I'm referring to. So what is that all about?
Yeah, so Perdekamp emotional method, PEM. I actually got into this about 3 years ago during COVID. So it started in Germany. It's actually, they're growing it. So the founder and it's still a growing thing, but they're actually in Australia growing it really rapidly at the moment. And I've tried a whole lot of acting techniques, but I really liked this one because it's about using physical sort of movement and different things to evoke emotion, which I think is just so useful for, they're finding there's use of it for people that are in, CEOs, in different fields, whatever you're doing. It's really proven to help, and it really helped me with acting, and it's something that just has helped me in life. And I think it's, such a great technique and something that, is really emerging and people should, look into if you're interested.
Absolutely. Let's get to the 4 practical pathways to give the people something that they can implement right now if they're like in a bad space, or if they just want to feel better emotionally and mentally. So the first thing is, as the title of the book is, move your mind, is exercising. And I'm a huge fan of all kinds of sports. I love it. But what can somebody do maybe who isn't a big fan of physical exercise, or who doesn't do it regularly because it's not a habit? Like, what would you suggest where to start?
I would say, again, just do anything. And I think everything comes down to habit. So if you want to make something into a habit, you got to do it regularly. And after about a month, your brain starts to rewire and it becomes habitual. So doing it on a regular basis for a month until it becomes conditioned, then you'll start enjoying it. So if you hate exercise, making it simple, thinking, okay, what's something I can tolerate? Maybe it's going for a really light jog for 15 minutes. Maybe it's walking the dog even. Maybe it's going to the gym for 15 minutes, or, I don't know, playing soccer with your friend. Whatever it is, finding what can I actually handle and making it pretty simple. I want to do that activity 3 times a week for 15 minutes, for example. So something that sounds easy that you can actually stick to, and then just do that for a month or so and just stick to it, because, you know, it's how we're wired. We like to have routine. We like certainty. So once you rewire your brain to make it feel like a natural, normal thing for you, you're more likely to stick to it. You're more likely to increase the regularity of it and, you know, go from there. So I think that's probably, you know, what I'd say for people that don't want to do it.
Yeah. And even just taking a walk is like so good to clear your mind and organize your thoughts and everything. Me and my girlfriend, we actually, every day that it's possible to take the time, we go for a walk in our local park, you know, just connect with nature. And it's so good. Unfortunately, we can't do it every day, but, you know, it doesn't have to be every day, as you said. So I highly recommend for everybody who's like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym or anything, just go for a walk, even just 30 minutes in nature, and like your mind will be so still and clear. It's awesome. Yeah.
100%.
The next thing is nutrition. Now this is, in my opinion, it's a little less straightforward than the exercise part because it's a little more complicated, but you talk about like not just general healthy nutrition, but there are actual foods and stuff that you should avoid for certain reasons. So can you maybe share with the people some of the foods that they might not touch if they want to make sure that their brain is like on spot, on top?
Yeah, I guess what I would say, you know, and nutrition is an area that we've brought in with Move Your Mind more recently, but in general, I think, you know, there's so much information. It's like all these fitness trends and all the different things. There's so many different diets, so many different things people can do. I think at the end of the day, just using logic for it. So, you know, how can I just have a balanced diet? How can I eat fresh foods? How can I limit the junk that I eat, not have too much sugar and all that kind of thing, but in a really simple way? Because I think the logical things are the things that stand the test of time and that are sustainable to do. So looking at it, okay, you know, it's okay to have a bit of junk, but I shouldn't do that all the time. I need to drink enough water every day. I need to eat enough, you know, all the basic things that we're taught, eat at regular times, are things we should do. So I think really just simplifying it, not trying to, you know, not trying to do anything too drastic, and just making it enjoyable and sustainable is so important.
Yeah, and you talk about especially sugar has such a big impact on our physical health, but also on our mental health. And I'm I'm someone, I love sugary sweet things, and I often catch myself like I'm eating way too much of it, and then I kind of lower the amount of stuff I eat, because, as you said, it's just you feel a lot more like mentally ready, and like your mind is just a lot more ready for stuff if you don't put bad fuel into your body. Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you follow some kind of diet? Like, are you vegetarian? Do you do intermittent fasting or something like that?
I don't actually. I tried the intermittent fasting a little bit, and, you know, there's a lot of people that are doing that now. There's a lot of sort of research around that. But for me, I try and just eat as balanced as I can. I'm not super strict about what I do or don't eat. So you know, it's probably sleep and diet, which obviously two of the most important areas have been things I've needed to improve on. But I just try and, you know, eat regularly, eat enough good foods, allow myself to eat junk. I train every day. I train really hard. So I think I, you know, can be a bit more lenient with what I do and don't eat. But in general, just keep it balanced and not overthink it, because, you know, I think food's such an enjoyable part of life. So I think we should enjoy it in a healthy way. So for me, it's just, you know, trying to be just keep it simple.
Yeah, that's the best advice, I guess. So the third thing that you talk about is connecting your mind, and that's mainly about technology and relationships. We've covered the part of technology, and you've also said that in relationship it's important to be present with the people you're interacting with. And you mentioned a couple of great things to connect personally with other people. Like you say that it's good to schedule a movie night with friends or schedule a game night where you play board games or stuff like that. So I actually highlighted all of these ideas because I thought, yeah, that's so true. That's the best way really to build friendships and just spend quality time with these people. So
I love that.
Do you have some kind of routine, or like do you have the intent of doing this like once a week or once a month, or how do you implement that or schedule that into your daily routine?
Well, yeah, I think it's so important that we are connected to people, and I don't have a routine with it, but I guess I've made it part organically of my life. I've got close friends, I've got people I interact with daily, I spend, quality time with people, I try and do, different things. I think getting out into nature, making time to just talk. I think really for me, it's just also being able to just have really deep and meaningful conversations with people, talking about real things. I probably should do more of the activity type stuff because it is so enjoyable when you do it. I went and played, forgot the name of it, some sort of racket game the other Saturday in New York, and I really enjoyed it. I don't make enough time to do that because, I don't know, you get caught up with other things, but I think it is important, and we enjoy it because it's doing these activities that we actually are going to get joy out of and remind us, that there's other elements of life. So I think it's, such an important thing.
I totally agree, yeah. So to kind of wrap this up, there's one question that I ask all the guests on here, and you might know where I'm getting at. Yeah. The show is called The Power of Books, and I'm curious. I want to know which book has impacted my guests' life the most. If you can name one or two.
I was going to say, can I do two? Because there's two that were really.
Yeah.
So the first one was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So I read that. It was recommended to me when I was going through that really difficult time, and I didn't really know a lot about this personal development space and about, meditation and all that sort of thing. And I read that book, and I remember I would read, 1 or 2 pages, and I'd have to keep stopping because everything was just such rich information. It was explained in such a clear way that I'd just be taking these things in and sitting there and thinking about it. And that happened throughout the whole book. And I just took so much out of it, and I ended up reading it another few times. And I just found it so valuable, and the way that it's written, the way that he talks about it, the points that he makes, and something I want to listen to again, after just talking about it now. So I think that was really impactful on my life. And I read it at a time when I really needed it. And then in more recent times, the book that I read that really resonated with me was called The Surrender Experiment. I don't know if you know this one, by Michael A. Singer. I think it is his name. And he did another book called The Untethered Soul. He's huge in that meditation world. He's also incredibly successful as a businessman. And that book was, I just couldn't put it down. It was incredible. He's talking about this surrender thing of, and he got into meditation in, I think it was the 60s or 70s or whenever it was, before it was, people thought he was crazy, and he was going down this academic path, and he decided to get into meditation and move into the middle of nowhere, and made this decision that he would just surrender and say yes to whatever was put in front of him. And it led him down all these crazy pathways, and led to this insane success and things that he couldn't have imagined doing. And it was just one of those books where, I found it incredibly impactful. Actually, and can I do one more? I just thought of the other one that I loved. This was, one that's not about personal development. This was Scar Tissue by Anthony Kiedis, the Red Hot Chili Peppers singer. That was one of those rare books where I just, from page 1, I couldn't put it down. Read the whole thing in one sitting, and his story is just phenomenal. He's so great at explaining at how he just tells that story, and I loved that book. So they would be, my top three.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing these. I've read the first one, Power of Now, and I also really liked it. But I realized that, because I read it in English and that's not my native language, so I realized it's a little complex if you don't read it in your mother language. So I gotta reread it, but in German next time.
For sure. I was gonna say your English is really, really good.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And the other two actually I haven't read yet, but I've heard great things, especially about Michael Singer's books. Yeah. Definitely. So thanks for sharing these.
No problem. No, thank you so much for having me on here. I've really enjoyed the chat.
And lastly, I want to leave people with this. When people want to check out your stuff or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so the best way would be going to my personal website, which is just nickbracks.com. That's got information on my podcast, my book, other things we're doing. And then if they go to my other website for Move Your Mind, which is moveyourmind.me, that's got information about what we do. It's got a community section where you can join our community program. We have a subscription where people can, get behind the scenes access to different events that we're putting on, videos, learning programs. There's about 50 hours worth of actual courses that we've created and a whole range of other things. And then the other part would just be on social media. If you want to find me on TikTok or Instagram, Instagram's Nick Bracks, TikTok's is Nick Bracks Official. They would be the main things.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will link to these pages in the show notes as well, so people can directly access them.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for being an ambassador for this topic and speaking out about it and kind of, just spreading the message. This is really important conversations to have. So I really appreciate that you took the time today and we talked about this, and I hope the listeners enjoyed this, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed it. Love what you're doing, and appreciate you having me on here, and would love to stay in touch, and hopefully we can, support what each other are doing. So hopefully do it again soon.
For sure. All right. Hope you enjoyed it, everyone, and see you next time. Bye-bye. All right. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Power of Books. As always, you will find all the relevant links for today's episode in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe so that you will get notified whenever a new episode drops. And you would do us a huge favor if you could give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. I hope to see you next week, and until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing. Bye bye.